paradrama tales.
My entitled family wants to take my house and give it to my brother, even though they kicked me out and laughed while I lived in a camper behind a warehouse. You ever wonder? What happens when the black sheep finally grows teeth? Stay. This story doesn't end how they expected. I think I always knew I didn't belong, not in some poetic coming-of-age kind of way. No, I mean it literally. In my own family, I was treated like the extra bag no one wanted to carry. My brother and I were just 3 years apart. But you'd think he was a prince, and I was some neighbor's kid they were forced to babysit. He got the newest clothes, the bigger slice of cake, the louder applause. I got the leftovers, and if I ever said a word about it, if I so much as looked upset, I was punished. Don't be selfish, they'd say. Stop being dramatic. But you know what's really dramatic? Watching your little brother get a brand new bike for Christmas while you unwrap a used hoodie, with the price tag still from Goodwill. Still, I learned to keep my mouth shut, especially after the first time I saw what happened when I didn't. My brother had taken my game console, ripped it right out of my hands in front of everyone, and when I tried to take it back, I was the one who got grounded. That's how it worked. He'd poke, push, steal, lie, and if I ever pushed back, I was the problem. Eventually, it got worse. He flirted with my first girlfriend until she dumped me, thought it was funny. And my parents? They didn't just tolerate it, they rewarded it, said I needed to toughen up. That's when I started to realize love in our house wasn't something you earned. It was something you were either born into or you weren't. When relatives came around, my parents would suddenly play happy family. They made sure we looked normal. Equal presence, they'd whisper. Act nice. If I ever slipped and told the truth about how things were behind closed doors, I was threatened. We'll take away everything, my mom once hissed, while smiling at the cousins across the room. So I waited, quietly, until I turned 18. I wasn't even finished with high school yet, but I packed a bag, walked out, and never looked back. Couch surfing felt like freedom compared to that place. They didn't come to my graduation, didn't call, and I didn't expect them to. I wasn't the son they wanted. I was the disposable one. But you know the thing about being thrown away? Sometimes you land on your feet, and sometimes, if you're stubborn enough, you build something better from the ground up. Back then, I didn't have much, but I had one thing they never expected, the will to survive without them. And that was the beginning of everything. When the pandemic hit, I lost everything: job, apartment, stability. My roommate bailed early, and with the lease ending, I had no choice but to sell almost everything I owned. I kept my truck. And with what little money I had left, I bought a $1,000 camper off a guy on Craigslist. It smelled like mildew and old cigarette smoke, but it was clean enough, solid enough, and it fit in the bed of my truck. That was going to be my home now. At first, I had a simple plan: park in my parents' driveway for a few weeks, get back on my feet, maybe land another job. But when I called and asked, they laughed, said the house was full, said I could park there if I paid market rent. Mind you, I wasn't even asking to come inside, just to sit quietly in their driveway. Still, they wanted the kind of money that could have rented a studio apartment. I hung up that night and sat in the cab of my truck, keys in my hand, wondering where the hell I was going to go. I ended up at the edge of a supermarket parking lot, tucked between two lampposts, pretending like I belonged there. But let me tell you something. There is no sleep like the kind you get when you're terrified someone might knock on your window and tell you to move along. That kind of fear doesn't let you rest. My brother and his wife, they heard about it, thought it was hilarious, called me a homeless bum, took selfies with their kids while I was scrounging for places with free Wi-Fi and clean bathrooms. At night, I snuck power from public outlets just to keep my camper battery alive. Sometimes I'd crouch next to a laundromat wall or a public park socket, just long enough to charge my phone and run the tiny fridge inside the camper. It wasn't legal, it wasn't safe, but it kept me alive. I learned to shower at gyms, shave with bottled water, eat cheap and stretch every dollar. I kept a map in my glove box with notes scribbled all over. Places with friendly security guards, quiet alleys, 24-hour bathrooms. I lived like that for months. People stared at me like I was invisible, or worse, like I was trash. But slowly, painfully, things started to change. I got a job in a neighboring city. Warehouse work. Not glamorous, but honest. And the boss? He didn't ask questions when he saw me parked out back every night. In fact, he seemed to admire it. told me I was always on call, always there, let me hook into the building for power and water, paid me in overtime, even let me pull the camper off the truck so I could use the truck freely during the day. That camper on concrete wasn't much, but for a long time, it was all I had. And, in a strange way, it made me stronger than I ever knew I could be. The warehouse became my home before I ever signed a lease. It wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. I'd park behind the building every night, next to a forgotten corner of the lot where no one ever went. It was quiet, out of sight, and just far enough from the dumpsters to avoid the smell. Every morning, I'd walk straight from my camper to the loading dock and get to work before anyone else showed up. I never clocked in late, never turned down a shift. I became the guy who said yes. Yes to night shifts, yes to weekends, yes to holidays. My boss noticed. He liked that I didn't complain, that I didn't mind getting my hands dirty. He even let me plug my camper into the building's power, said it was a fair trade. I'd work Sundays unpaid, and in return, I had heat in the winter, light at night, and enough electricity to keep my little fridge running. For the first time in years, someone saw my work ethic before they saw my past. I didn't tell anyone where I lived, except for one security guard. We'd chat during the graveyard shift. Over time, he became my friend, the first one I'd had in a while. He never pitied me, just respected how I handled the cards I was dealt. Sometimes he'd bring me extra meals from the break room or sneak me a fresh pack of batteries. Those small kindnesses meant everything. Life was simple, hard, but simple. I showered at a friend's place when I could, used a gym membership to stay clean, and kept a small library of movies in my camper. I watched DVDs on an old portable player I'd found in a pawn shop. There wasn't much to do, but I had books, movies, and work, and for a while, that was enough. Over time, pay started to add up. And then one day, I got promoted. Supervisor. Better hours, better pay, more responsibility. I couldn't believe it. For the first time, I felt like I was getting ahead. That's when I started thinking about something bigger, something permanent, a home. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It wasn't about revenge or showing off. It was about peace, stability, dignity. I'd spent too long surviving. I wanted to live. So I started searching. Every free hour I had, I was scrolling listings, calculating numbers, making plans. And then I found it. A manufactured home, 3 bedrooms, just 2 miles from work. It wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. But it was solid, affordable, mine. I used almost every penny of my savings for the down payment, signed the papers, got the keys, and just like that, I wasn't the guy in the camper anymore. I was a homeowner. No handouts, no shortcuts, no family support, just grit. And it was worth every sleepless night. I still remember the moment I stepped inside for the first time. No furniture, no curtains, not even a working fridge yet. Just bare floors, quiet walls, and sunlight filtering through dusty blinds. But to me, it was everything. It smelled like opportunity, like freedom, like the first breath after being held underwater for too long. This house wasn't big by most standards. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, and a yard just big enough to park my truck and set up my camper in the back. But it was mine. No landlord, no roommates, no parents watching through the blinds with judgment or control. I could walk barefoot at midnight. I could slam the door if I wanted. I could just exist. And in a moment of pure, stupid pride, I posted about it. I took a few pictures, nothing fancy, just a couple of shots of the living room and backyard, captioned something like, "Hard work pays off." Finally have a place to call home. That's it. I thought maybe a few old friends would like it. Maybe I'd inspire someone out there still stuck in their own version of a camper behind a warehouse story. What I didn't expect was them. A few weeks later, I opened my door to find my parents, my brother Dan, his wife, and all 4 of their kids standing on my porch, smiling, acting like they were here for a Hallmark family reunion. I never gave them my address, never invited them, but somehow they found me. Maybe they followed me home from work. Maybe they asked around. Doesn't matter. They were there, uninvited, unannounced, and far too comfortable. The moment I opened the door, they barged in like tourists at an open house. They didn't knock, didn't ask, just pushed past me, eyes darting around, whispering comments. Dan's wife had that smug smirk she always wears when she thinks she's about to win something. And my parents, they kept saying things like, You've got so much space now, and it's too much for one person. Red flags, sirens, alarm bells. I didn't know it then, but they weren't just being nosy. They were scouting, measuring, planning. Dan pulled me aside and said he wanted to talk. The rest of them, as if on cue, stepped outside and left us alone. And that's when he said it, cool as can be, like he was asking for a glass of water. You should let us move in. It's just too much space for one guy, and we need it more. You've got the camper. You can live out there. No offer of rent, no discussion, just assumption, entitlement. That's when I realized this wasn't a visit. It was an invasion, and I was about to find out just how far they'd go to take what I built. I wish I could say I laughed when Dan said it, that I brushed it off as a bad joke and moved on, but I didn't. Because it wasn't a joke. He was serious. Dead serious. He wanted me to move back into my old camper so he and his ever-expanding family could live in the house I bought with every scrap of dignity I had left. And the worst part? He spoke like it was already decided. Dan said things like, "It just makes sense," and "You already lived in the camper, so it's no big deal." He laid out imaginary rules, how I couldn't enter the house without permission, how there'd be curfews to protect the kids' bedtime, how I'd have to respect their privacy. Their privacy. In my home. It was so absurd, I couldn't even find words at first. Then came the line, the one I've heard 100 times since. Just do it for Dan. When I didn't nod along like some good little side character in the Dan show, he doubled down. Said I didn't need all this space since I didn't have a wife or kids. That he had a real family to support. That I should help out because that's what family does. But family never helped me when I needed a roof. When I was cold in that camper, they mocked me. When I asked to park in their driveway, they told me to pay like a tenant or get lost. And now they wanted me to give up my house? I started recording, quietly pulled out my phone and hit record just in case. Dan didn't notice. He just kept talking, justifications, demands. His voice got louder, his arms waved, and finally he reached out his hand to shake, like the deal was done. That's when I snapped. I stood up, looked him square in the eyes, and said one word. No. Loud, clear, final. Dan stumbled back like I'd slapped him. I never raised my voice growing up. I was always punished when I did. But this was my house, my rules. When I refused, he got angry, red-faced, told me I didn't deserve the house, that I was selfish, that Mom and Dad said I was going to do this and that I would, that they'd already decided, as if their words still carried any weight. Like clockwork, the front door burst open and the rest of the invasion party stormed back in. Mom, Dad, sister-in-law, surrounding me, pressuring me. Do it for Dan. He has a family. You don't need all this, they shouted, pleaded, bargained. And when I still didn't bend, she hit me. Dan's wife lunged, caught me in the face with a fist, screaming like I'd taken something from her. That's when I held up my phone and said I'd call the cops. And just like that, the room changed. But the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. You'd think that after being screamed at, hit in my own home, and threatened with a mob of family guilt trippers, they'd get the message. But people like them, entitlement doesn't retreat. It regroups. A week after that confrontation, just like my mother warned, they came back. This time with Dan leading the charge, pounding on my front door like he was collecting a debt. But I was ready. I had latch chains installed, cameras running, my phone recording, and a fire in my chest that wasn't going out. I cracked the door just enough to see their faces. Dan, red and furious. Mom with her crocodile tears loaded, and my father looking like he was ready to bulldoze his way inside. They begged, demanded, and pleaded in one breath. Was I ready to come to my senses? Would I please do this for Dan? Did I really want to split the family over a house? And again, I told them no, no to guilt, no to manipulation, no to the idea that I was still the boy who had to roll over and obey. They left in defeat, but this time it felt too easy. And sure enough, just a few days later, I came home from work to find a moving truck parked in my driveway, Dan's van beside it, boxes on my lawn, his kids playing in my backyard. They were moving in. Dan waved like this was some sitcom surprise. His wife, let's call her Queen Entitlement, smirked at me and said, "It's okay, your mommy said we could." I was shaking, not with fear, with rage. I climbed into my truck, locked the doors, and called the cops right there while Queen Entitlement pounded on the window, yelling that I was ruining everything. By the time the officers arrived, they'd locked themselves inside my house, changed the locks, left the old one drilled out on the porch, and right next to it, the drill and the bit set they used, like a criminal version of leaving your signature on the wall. When the cops questioned them, Dan and his wife pulled out a fake rental agreement, complete with a forged version of my signature. It didn't even look close. They'd probably never even seen my real handwriting. I told the police everything, showed them my driver's license with the address, the broken lock, the drill, the video on my phone of the earlier assault. And that's when the gravity of the situation hit everyone. Felony-level stuff. I told them flat out. I didn't press charges then only because of the kids. But I could, and if they didn't leave immediately, I would. Suddenly, everyone was very quiet. Dan turned pale. My parents stopped pleading. Queen Entitlement cried, ripped up the fake lease, and tried to play victim. The police made them pick up every torn piece of paper before they were allowed to leave. They packed up in silence. For once, the noise was gone. But I wasn't celebrating, because I knew this wasn't the end, not with people like them. They don't knock when they return, they break in. I used to think Dan could get away with anything, and for most of his life, he did. He was the golden child, Mom and Dad's pride, the one who could do no wrong. When he mocked me, they called it teasing. When he stole from me, they said, boys will be boys. When he tried to steal my home, they said, just do it for Dan. But this time, it was different. This time, the whole family was watching. After they tried to break into my house, drilled the lock, changed it, staged a fake lease, I didn't hold back. I posted everything on social media, video, photos, my side of the story. I made sure I got ahead of their lies before they had a chance to spin it, and to my surprise, people believed me. Extended relatives, cousins, uncles, even my mother's brother started reaching out. Some apologized, some were furious at my parents, but most were shocked that the golden boy they had admired for years had done something so brazen. Their silence cracked. The curtain was pulled back. The real Dan was finally exposed, and just when I thought things couldn't get more absurd, they tried again. A few weeks later, I pulled into my driveway and saw a moving truck. Dan, his wife, and their kids were unloading boxes, acting like this was their home, like they belonged here. His wife smiled at me and said, "It's okay. Your mommy said it was fine." I called the cops before I even got out of the truck. They changed my locks, tried to fake documents, and when the police arrived, they presented a forged rental agreement, one with my signature that looked like it had been scribbled by a child. It was so obviously fake, it was laughable. And when I threatened legal action, fraud, forced entry, assault, suddenly the tone shifted. My parents backed down. Dan got pale. His wife, of course, threw a tantrum on my lawn. That's when the cracks really started to show. Dan couldn't hide behind Mom and Dad anymore. And as his wife screamed and sobbed, tearing up the fake lease like confetti, he stood there, silent, beaten, ashamed. The kids cried, the cops stood watch, and I didn't move. I told them to get out, told Dan to pack up, told them all, this isn't sharing, this is stealing. And in front of everyone, 4 officers, neighbors watching through blinds, my whole front yard audience, I told my mother the truth. I don't love him. He's not my brother. He's a man who's taken from me his entire life, and I'm done. Dan didn't say a word. He just gathered the boxes, one by one. The golden child had fallen. And this time, no one was there to catch him. Not even the parents who built his pedestal in the first place. It's funny, isn't it? The same camper they all mocked me for, the one they called an eyesore, the one I cried in on cold nights behind a warehouse, ended up becoming the thing that brought a little peace back into this mess. Not for me, not for Dan, but for his kids. After the divorce, after the affair came out, after everything imploded, Dan showed up at my door again. But this time, he wasn't angry. He wasn't entitled. He looked tired, hollow, different. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for a room in my house. He asked to borrow the camper, said he wanted to give his oldest son his own bedroom, just one space in that crowded, broken house to call his own. I could hear the shame in Dan's voice when he asked. I could tell he hated needing help from me, and maybe that's why I said yes. Not because I forgave him, not because we were suddenly brothers again, but because those kids deserve better than the storm they were born into. So I said yes. I parked the camper behind my parents' house and let Dan move in. Same camper, same wiring, same cramped little bunk. Only this time, it wasn't survival, it was sanctuary. And maybe it was a strange kind of poetry. The golden child, now humbled, living in the very symbol of the struggle he once laughed at. He didn't complain, didn't make excuses. He fixed what he could inside it, kept it clean, made it livable. And more than once, I caught him just sitting on the steps with his son, watching the sun go down. Like maybe he finally understood something. My parents, for what it's worth, changed too. Maybe not completely, but enough. They apologized, genuinely. My father, who used to explode at me for the slightest thing, now looks away when I enter a room, like he doesn't know how to talk to a son he spent decades breaking. My mother cries more easily now, says sorry for things she didn't used to even notice. They know what they lost. And maybe, just maybe, they're trying not to lose more. As for me, I rent out. 2 rooms in my house to close friends now. The extra income helps, and the silence helps more. The house finally feels like mine again, not just in paperwork, but in presence. Dan still lives in the camper. His ex is gone, the kids are calmer, and for the first time in our lives, there's no screaming, no grabbing, no do it for Dan. Just choices. Mine, his, ours. I still don't trust him, but I respect the choice he made for his kids, and that's more than he ever gave me growing up. Sometimes the best revenge is healing, even when you never get the apology you wanted. They say home is where the heart is, but for me, home was a war zone, then a camper, then a quiet little house with locks I chose, and a front door that didn't swing open without warning. And now it's something else entirely. It's a boundary, a line in the sand that says, this far and no further. I used to wonder why they treated me the way they did, why being born second made me disposable, why love always came with a condition, and usually one that required sacrifice. But the truth is, sometimes there is no reason. Sometimes people choose favorites. Sometimes they build golden pedestals and leave others in the dirt. And sometimes they expect you to thank them for it. But here's the thing they didn't count on. I survived. And more than that, I healed. Not because they changed, not because they came crawling back, but because I stopped living for their approval. I learned that forgiveness doesn't require reunion, that peace doesn't always look like hugs and family dinners. Sometimes peace is silence. Sometimes it's space. Sometimes it's simply not answering the door when chaos knocks again. I don't tell this story to play the victim. I tell it because somewhere out there, someone's being told to just do it for family. Someone's being guilted, cornered, sacrificed again and again for someone else's comfort. And if that's you, let me be clear. You don't owe anyone your life just because they share your blood. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep your family warm. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose you. And when you finally do, you'll find that there's a kind of strength in the silence, in the stillness, in knowing that the home you've built, no matter how small, how humble, how fought for, is yours. They came from my house. What they lost was my silence. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of something you've lived through or something you're still facing, don't scroll away in silence. Share it. Speak it. Send it to someone who needs to hear. You are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, real, unfiltered, subscribe, stay with me, and let's keep telling the truth. Because sometimes the truth is the only thing that sets us free.